First item is citizen concerns. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak on anything that's already on the agenda? And please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I'd appreciate it if Secretary Rhodes would bring my mailbox back. They hauled it away.
Mark, would you like to address her briefly?
Property name and address.
What's your name and address, sir?
The what?
What's your name and address?
Pat Benjamin, 7 Mobile Blacktop.
Okay.
I was in here in March, and I removed it for 60 days, and nothing else was done with nobody else's. So I put it back, and they removed it a week ago today.
Okay. Can we let Mr. Nera speak?
The mailbox has been ordered to remove. We are collecting an inventory of other ones to serve notice on. We have other duties with a busy construction program, so we're doing them as we have time to send out notices.
And where is his mailbox at the moment?
It's sitting at Climbing Hill in the Emergency Services Building next to it. So it's safe. All he has to do is go get it. He just can't reinstall it anywhere within the road right of way.
I don't feel I should have to bring it back. And isn't it a federal offense if they take my mail out and put it in that box?
I don't know about that, but I know that we talked about this in March, is
Right.
we don't get to make the rules on what goes in the right of way, and if it's excessive, and you were told to remove it.
I did.
And you removed it and then put it back.
But there's ones on the Bronson Blacktop that I reported you guys, and one's is a steel beam, and you guys blacktopped it in.
And as I understand it, we're working on those going forward.
Okay. What gives him the right to come on my property and cut my walnut tree down?
I don't know anything about that, so if you want to take it up with the engineer, you may.
Or do I gotta go to the sheriff's department, report it, that you guys were trespassing and you cut my walnut tree down?
Was it in the right of way?
Nope, it's in my yard.
Well, like I said, I don't know anything about that. So if you'd like to file a report with the sheriff's office, that's where I'd start.
I'll be back.
Anybody else have any citizen concerns that are not on the agenda? Approval of the agenda, I will move that.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Monson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say
Aye.
no.
There he is.
Sorry, Mr. Young. Passes 5-0. Consent agenda. Items 3 through 9 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3, approval of the minutes of the June 22 meeting. 4, approval of claims. 5, building services, approval of items to be auctioned for personal property disposition policy. 6, county treasurer, approval of resolution for tax abatement for initials AT. B is approval of resolution for tax abatements for initials KJ. 7, board administration, approval of reappointment to various boards and commissions. B is approval of appointment of Joseph Donovan to the Veterans Affairs Commission. And C is approval of appointment of Kenneth Green to the Community Action Agency of Siouxland Board of Directors.
And I would just thank them for coming tonight, although you don't have to say anything.
You made it.
Item 8 is Human Resources. A, appointment of Don Zonley as a temporary service director for Woodbury County Emergency Service Department, effective June 30 of this year. B, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. C, authorization to initiate hiring process. D, approval of retiree request to remain on the dental insurance and retiree's spouse to remain on the health and dental insurance. E is presentation of award certificate to Kyle Gates. 9 is secondary roads, approval of a utility permit for installation of fiber optic cable in county right of way for FAR Technologies.
I'll move the consent agenda.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any comments or others, sir?
Back to the claims there, we did submit certs in there this week, which they proved, they can get their money because they're authorized.
Okay.
Meals on Wheels, it's in there. We'd like to have it pulled out by the board till next week. We're waiting for a statement of insurance and their form filled out as a nonprofit. So we need pulled by the board.
Any other items? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Board administration. Dennis Butler, approval of resolution authorizing the use of preliminary official data in connection with the sale of general obligation urban renewal county road improvement bonds for series 2021.
This is something we have to do to sell the bonds, then he gives an official opinion on the bond sale, and it goes from there, and hopefully by August 24th, we will have the sale done and funds deposited in Woodbury County's hands for the road project.
Move it.
Motion by Monson, second by DeWitt. Any other further questions for Mr. Butler? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Secondary roads. Approve a resolution to hold a public hearing for the proposed road vacation and schedule July 17, 2021 for said hearing.
We received a request from the adjacent landowners to close a portion of Garner Avenue between 130th and 140th Street. We're looking at doing the north half mile. The south half mile is necessary to remain in place to allow access to one of the landowners' 80-acre parcels. The north half can be closed. They've had a problem with vandalism, kids getting in there, getting stuck at night, a lot of late night door knocks and such. Typically, if we get a road like this closed where there's no exit, you don't see the young people driving up and down it. You're the youngest looking guy on the board, I don't know. But the board's heard these before, so this is, I thought maybe this was still fairly fresh, so.
Move to hold a public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Monson, second by Raddick, to schedule July 17, 2021 for said hearing. Do we need to set time for that?
We don't necessarily. You can set a time for it if the auditor has a preference.
Okay.
Okay.
You got the motion in second? Yes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Secondary roads, approval of a project agreement for the improvement of 130th Street west of Buchanan Avenue.
This is with Brenton and Sarah Feichtenberger. If you'll recall, they requested that a portion of the level C road of 130th Street west of Buchanan be improved so that they could build a home on property that they own immediately west of the intersection. The board approved that change in the level C designation of the road, but now it remains to upgrade that road from a dirt road to gravel. We have a policy for allowing road upgrades where the adjoining property owner contributes to the cost of doing that work. In this case, we're estimating the completion of that work to cost around $20,000. That would include the dirt work and graveling. We're proposing that as a not to exceed cost for the Feigenbergers. They are taxpayers after all. We're not looking to load them up with huge expenses on this, but this will cover the majority, if not all, of the cost of that road upgrade. Brenton and Sarah have both signed it. I recommend that the board approve the agreement to allow us to complete the upgrade to 130th Street. Work has already started out there. We had dirt in the area from ditch cleaning projects in preparation for our gravel road improvement program that we hauled in there. The Feichtenbergers also had dirt available from their lot when they were doing some of their grade work for their shed and house. So that has been placed into the.
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Monson. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Do I need to sign this one too?
Yes, you do. Thank you very much.
Is it warm out there, Matthew?
actually a little bit cooler.
All right, we're slightly ahead. We're going to recess the Board of Supervisors meeting and convene the Bennett McDonald Smithland Drainage District Trustee meeting. Item 13, approval of the minutes for the June 22nd meeting.
I'll move it.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We will now adjourn the Bennett McDonald Smithland Drainage District Trustees meeting and continue with the Board of Supervisors meeting. Since we are not yet at a set time, do we have any reports on committee meetings?
I do have one. Well, I had CERTS and I also had Housing Trust Fund. CERTS, nothing really to report to the board, but on the Housing Trust Fund, there's more money coming from the federal government for Housing Trust Fund. And in doing so, then accepting that money, it would require a little bit more money for the match side of things. So I think it ends up to be maybe about $5,000 or $6,000 to Woodbury County that I think normally we take out of sales tax, I thought. I can't remember, Dennis, if you know offhand.
Sales tax number?
Isn't that what we, Housing Trust Fund, do we normally fund that through sales tax or?
Sales tax.
Yeah, so
Local option.
they'll probably be coming at some point to be on the agenda to ask for that.
Anything else?
That's it.
Mr. Monson?
Nope.
Mr. Ray? Matthew, do you have anything?
No, sir.
As a member of the Law Enforcement Center Authority, the final steps were taken yesterday to get the contract signed with the contractor to begin construction for the new LEC structure located on 28th Street between Lewis Boulevard and Outer Belt. And so far, quite an accomplishment. Not quite as exactly as we'd like to be on schedule, but things happen, and a lot of things happened last year, so there we are. We do have a written in ink groundbreaking ceremony on September 15th, was it, Dennis?
Yes.
Subject to change, weather, 20 other things could happen, but so far things are moving forward. Dirt work is progressing. I have not been out there for several days to see the progress, but I know that they're out there and still going. So
I did just go out there to take a look, and it's amazing how tucked back in there it is and how much work has already been done.
I mean, we're looking at this thing on drawings, and it's going to be almost amazing to finally see it as a standing structure, see how much land it occupies, because the LEC structure will occupy, well, no, I shouldn't say that, but the land usage for that structure is going to be almost exactly 10 acres, 9-point-some acres. Of course, a lot of that will be green space and parking lot and so forth, but an exciting step and something we need to get going on.
I would go back to the appointment of various boards and commissions. Do we need to rustle up some more folks? Can you send us out what we need to get? And who's on there? I think there's more than one person on Civil Service Commission, or I guess the other two are appointed.
I don't know right offhand who all we need, but
Yeah.
you know this last time.
Looking for somebody for the county library.
Kevin, you got plenty of time. You live off the county.
Thanks, I know my limits.
We'll even give you a good title for that. Round 2 of citizen concerns. Anybody wish to speak on anything that's not already on the agenda? 16, well, we might be about there. We are there. Set time of 4:45 for community and economic development. Public hearing and approve second reading of commercial wind energy conversion systems ordinance.
Good evening, David Gleiser, Community Economic Development Director. I'm going to start by handing out these copies of the... These are the copies of the ordinance as they've been left in the auditor's office since last week. And then we added some suggested or potential revisions to the language. And last week, we received and worked on some feedback and comments that we received from the conservation community. And, it was from the board table that I was directed to, add language to add additional protections for the Loess Hills landform area. So we worked with Graham McGaffin, who's the Associate Director for the Nature Conservancy in Iowa, and he's the Loess Hills Project Director, and worked with him and to come up with some definition that we added, or that we're suggesting that we add to the ordinance. And then we also included a description of the Loess Hills landform area in another section of the ordinance under setbacks. And we also added an additional piece of language under the setback waivers, so folks in the Loess Hills landform area cannot get a variance and get an exception to those setbacks. Some of the feedback that we've received from others in the conservation community have been related to item D on that page there behind you. It's the, if you just turn around, folks, and look at that PowerPoint screen, the description there that we're using for that landform area is one that it's recognized by the United States federal government, as well as the state, DNR, as well as the state's appointed authority, the Loess Hills Alliance, as that shape file is what is considered to be out there as the Loess Hills. And we propose, or it was recommended, that we include that mapping on Beacon, so it's publicly accessible for viewing on the county's website. Last night during the County Zoning Commission meeting, we had some of our tenured commissioners warn us against creating a conservation overlay district for the Loess Hills, because the county had numerous issues with trying to create one back in the early 2000s. And essentially what it had to do with is property rights, personal property rights in the Loess Hills. I've been told that roughly 90% of the Loess Hills is privately owned. And so I've been warned, and I've been asked to warn the Board of Supervisors.
I lived through that section, and I have to tell you, that was to protect them from losing the rights of their land. Wind generation on their land should not be their option in the Loess Hills, because it's a public, national public space. I don't see where warning anybody is necessary to keep the wind generation out of the Loess Hills. Now, they can own their land and they can do what they want with it, but I don't know that that gives them the right to do anything they want to do. That would be my point. Also, you have on page 3, Loess Hills landform area, you got a typo there. Shall mean.
Oh, thank you. And so we met this afternoon and discussed incorporating this language in the reference of the Loess Hills of Western Iowa Special Resource Study and Environmental Assessment prepared by the National Park Service in 2002. I would ask the board to decide if you would like us to maintain that shape file on Beacon so it's publicly accessible and viewable to the public. I don't believe that it is creating a conservation overlay district in our zoning ordinance. That's not what we're proposing. We are just proposing that we recognize a federally recognized landform area, and and we suggest that we put that shape file on the website, because if we're asking developers to meet certain criteria or landowners to do so, we want to have the ability to provide them with the tools to do so.
Thank you. I think it should be on there. It's not any mandate, but it certainly lines points out where they are, or what they're dealing with and where it is. And it doesn't change the ownership of anybody's land.
If you could go to the next slide, please, Heather. You know, these were the changes that we incorporated last week. And basically, we added language to our whereas section that came from the development plan and our county economic and land use goals. And then we added the 1 mile setback distance from the Luss Hills. So those are already done. If you can go to the next slide, please, Heather. I wanted to share with the board, if you can kind of zoom out. Last week, we were discussing setback distances from the Luss Hills and whether that should be 1 mile, 2 mile, or further, or shorter. And then what we did is the county engineer's office created a heat map. They put the shape file of the Luss Hills on our map, on our county map, and then they added a 1 mile buffer and a 2 mile buffer from the outer perimeter of that boundary. And then what we did is we did a setback perimeter around every rural residence in the county. The first one on the left hand is 600 feet. The second one is 1,250 feet. That gives you a visual idea of the buildable area that will be left in Woodbury County if we accept these proposed setbacks.
How many feet was each unit?
Left is 600, right is 1,250.
And how many feet required from another one?
600 from that one and 1,250 from the other. So if you go to the next slide, Heather.
Hey, those are showing distances from residences though, not from a windmill that's already been set up, right?
Those are distances from, yes, from each
Residents, but
from
not from a
residents.
windmill.
Correct.
So if a windmill went up, there would be setback potentially from that location as well.
That
In addition
from-
to what's being shown on the map.
Here's a residence, we did 600 feet from there, and we did 1,250 feet from there. Any white space left is where a tower could go.
But if a tower goes in one of those white spaces, what is the setback distance required from
He's
the
asking how
tower?
close from two towers.
How close,
to each
how
other.
close can another tower be built? Because that's what we're not showing on the map.
Like, can the towers be 75 feet apart?
No. A setback distance would be from each other, so I mean, the same setback distance would apply to a tower, to property line, to a structure, to a protected area.
So a tower has to be 650 from another tower.
No. I don't think I'm,
He's asking how close can two towers be to each other?
Because we're trying to represent the space that is allowable right now for somebody to come in and set the windmill potentially. But once a windmill goes up in any one of those areas, what is the regulation on how close a tower can be built already? So forget residences, just how far from an existing tower can another tower be built?
it's not in the,
If we need to
They've got to
revisit
be
that,
7 rotor diameters away from each other. So rotor diameter is what?
It-
90 foot.
it would depend on the,
About 360 feet, because I think they're making 180, 190.
Okay,
it's 7 lengths?
7 rotor diameters.
How
yeah.
many, how
7
many
times
feet? 300 some?
300
So
some.
half a mile?
Yeah. That seems awfully long. Where did you get that? 7?
From sciencing.com.
I'm just trying to get a sense of how many towers can feasibly even fit in Woodbury.
well, a 200 megawatt farm would be 50 to 150 turbines, depending on the size and their capabilities. And I think that's what's showing is what the buildable area is left from a residence with those setback distances.
Because as soon as you're a 1 mile setback, Woodbury County is closed to wind.
You could theoretically block commercial wind farms by adding certain setback distances, is what we're trying to do.
I'm not advocating for one position or another, just so we all understand what we're talking about here.
So explain to me, what are the two zoning things where these can be placed? What are the two?
With what we're proposing in our standalone ordinance, we are not suggesting to use zoning districts as a requirement for them to be able to build
I
on.
thought we had only 2 zoning designs that could have,
In the current zoning ordinance, We have 2 zoning districts,
And they are what?
agricultural preservation, general industrial.
Okay, so do we, does the zoning commission have the right to refuse a conditional use permit?
Okay, so what we are proposing is large-scale commercial wind farm ordinance. That would be a standalone ordinance that the Board of Supervisors would review and approve. It has nothing to do with zoning. The small-scale residential private use wind turbine that an individual might want to go put on their private property, that is allowed in the zoning ordinance as a conditional use and in those 2 zoning districts. So we're talking about 2 different things.
So, how much, are we looking for any kind of legal trouble if, for example, the Les Hills is 90% privately owned and all of a sudden we're telling people what they can and can't do with their private property?
No, I believe not. Joshua?
Well, I think David was starting to explain that earlier as far as there was some discussion as to whether a zoning overlay should be created just for the Les Hills. And that was one thing that I cautioned on, was the potential for how that could be used in the future as far as zoning restrictions and concerns from landowners. But we're not doing that with this ordinance.
No.
I think in going through this, it's our understanding that most of the area that would be considered the Les Hills is not really suitable for a wind farm anyway. So I don't know that there's going to be aggrieved landowners or a landowner that had the potential to put a wind farm in that's not going to be able to. There may be some isolated cases, but I mean, correct me if I'm wrong on that, David.
No, I think you're right. I think if we created a conservation overlay district for the Les Hills, then I think we'd be in a situation like the board was in 2003, where people would be coming and saying, you know, you're putting restrictions on us. And you know, I understand the point of saying, well, you know, what's the difference between a conservation overlay district and recognizing this area as a protected area? And I guess my answer is that it's not in the zoning ordinance. We have other conservation areas in our standalone ordinance that we recognize. We recognize in this ordinance private land that could be owned or held by a nonprofit organization with a permanent conservation easement. And so those are also protected areas under this ordinance as well.
All right. I need to be out of here at 5:15, drop dead period. The rest of the board can carry on without me, but can we get some citizens to come up and give their input?
Sure, absolutely.
Anybody wishing to speak on this?
Real quick, can we zoom out on those maps? Those 2? Because these are 2,500 and
Can you show all 4 of the maps together?
or just zoom out so we can see the whole county.
What do you want, Keith?
I just wanted to zoom out on the county maps there so we can see the whole county.
This is the entire county.
That is the entire
That's
county?
the entire county.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that, an entire,
Here's Sioux City. Cushing's like right over there.
Where's my doghouse?
Public input, we have a public hearing. Would you like to speak, please? Name and address?
My name is Chris Zummerzant. My address is Bronson, Iowa. I'm a Woodbury County Zoning Commissioner, chairperson. I'm also on the board of Woodbury County Conservation. I know Mark, we've known a long time. We've gone through this Los Hills terminology before, and we've had basically, if you'll recall, nearly riots over the language. I don't want to see that happen again, but I also want to let you all know that you have the opportunity to control these towers in our current ordinances. This does not have to be a standalone ordinance. You have control because there's 2 districts that we have conditional use permit opportunity. Only 2. There's only 2, and it's ag preservation and it's industrial, right?
General industrial.
Thank you. So the conditional use permit, that has to go before the Board of,
Zoning Commission Board of Adjustment.
thank you, Zoning Commission, Board of Adjustment, and it comes to you.
No, it is not.
So you can deny any of these things.
The conditional use through the zoning does not go to the Board of Supervisors.
You can weigh in on any of these things. You have control over this stuff without having to put Los Hills in it and causing the rift that we had in 2004 through 2008 to try and rewrite these ordinances. In your development plan of 2004, the second page, I think on the preliminary information, they said that they wanted to get rid of the Los Hill terminology because it infringed on the private property rights of its citizen. The way we're doing it now with conditional use permits, we give the public two opportunities at the minimum to be able to speak, voice their opinions on whether they want this to happen or not. And that's usually what comes to the decision, whether they're good or bad. If we have enough opposition for these things, we'll follow what the people of this county want. So I'm asking you to please take the Los Hills overlay out. That was a disaster in 2004 and 2008. I don't want to see that again. I don't think it's good for the county. I think it was a black eye then. And I think we can do that without doing this now, effectively. And I hope you'll consider my request. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak? Sir.
I'm Dave Waller, 2949 Jasper Avenue. We're down by Smithland. We live on top of a hill in the Los Hills. Beautiful views, gorgeous views. I mean, we can see the whole valley and sunsets. We can see to the east, see sunrises. Plain and simple, I don't want to see them. I don't want to see them. I've officiated high school football in Northwest Iowa for 30 years. Every fall we'd go out and there's 200 or 300 more all over. I don't like them. Plain and simple. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Can we go back to the other two maps real quick there? And I don't remember the information the guy shared yesterday. I know the one guy was advocating the 1 mile distance, but obviously that takes out the entire county, and I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, we're actually recommending a 1,250-foot setback distance from occupied residences. And then we're also recommending that we add setbacks for substations and accessory facilities and give those a 10-foot setback and make them not able to locate in the right-of-way. We initially proposed a 600-foot or 110% of the tower height. And I believe that based on the comments we received from the utilities and amongst our own work group, we believe that the 1,250 setback distance is appropriate. And that's what we'd recommend. I would add that if the Board of Supervisors does not want to recognize the Los Hills in this standalone ordinance, you don't have to do that either. So.
Again, I personally don't want to see them in the Les Hills, but I don't think that wind company would want one there. I just don't see the advantage to sporadically placing them on tops of hills and then having to run the wiring.
It was why we didn't suggest it in the first place, but after it was brought up at the board table, we reached out to our stakeholder partners and they actually were encouraging. And, I got an email from the Nature Conservancy this morning and they were very appreciative of what we were going to propose tonight and what the board adopted last Tuesday. So, and during the zoning commission, one of its recommendations was to have the standalone ordinance and not go through the zoning ordinance. So you guys have a couple of different ways to skin the cat, but now we're in the process of adopting the ordinance, and so I don't know if you want to scrap the idea of this standalone ordinance and just leave it where it is in the zoning ordinance.
I think we have We can't prevent them from coming. I mean, if they want to put up a windmill out here in the middle of the county, they can do it. I don't know that we can stop any of that.
But I'm sorry, Mark, but I thought our basic premise here last week was to protect our roads and bridges and such. And I guess I got a little bit lost in the fact that we want to reconstruct the ordinance in this fashion.
It wasn't, like I said, when I asked to set the hearing, we had proposed, the language that was in front of you without the Lost Hills language and these setbacks. It's because the board asked is why we're here today discussing it. And I've worked with the stakeholder groups that I was asked to work with, and I presented all the information that I told other stakeholder groups that I would present. And so I would just present the information for the board to decide.
I'm going to move the second reading, and I would like to stick with the 1250 with the protection area.
I do have Chris Sant again from Woodbury County. Zoning Commission. I do have permission to speak on behalf of Tom Bride, who is the co-chair for the Zoning Commission. He did want me to say and let you know that he is opposed to the Lost Hills language. He doesn't want to see this be a standalone. He wants it to fall under the zoning. He is also the president of the Woodbury County Farm Bureau Association here in Mobile. So he expects to hear back from the Farm Bureau on their opinion on that. And again, if I remember correctly, Mark, you might remember that Farm Bureau weighed in heavily when we were talking about the Lost Hills overlay, and that it was an infringement on private property rights.
Well, let's leave out the overlay. No big deal. But I think we need to get something in writing to assist us in terms of where these things are going.
To a certain extent, I do believe that, but standalone, I don't know if that's actually necessary, because we do have the zoning districts that regulate that at this current time. And then we also have the conditional use permit that goes through the process where the public can also hear it. It's not just a private property right, but it gives all of the citizens of the area the opportunity to weigh in, which I think is a democratic process, and it's something that we really stood by firmly when we wrote those ordinances in 2008. We'd like to be able to continue to do that. Thank you.
Is there anyone who thinks that the Lost Hills is a good area for these windmills?
Mr. Gleiser saying no.
If the question was, does anybody believe the Lost Hills is a good location for a large-scale commercial wind farm, I would say not to my knowledge.
I would agree, so I'm not sure how much difference this makes.
Can I speak again? I'm sorry. Historically speaking, the issues come up, and if I could. Sorry, historically speaking, if I'm not mistaken, we did approve a windmill that was supposed to be a test windmill to see if this was an appropriate area. I think this was, do you remember how long ago? Was that before you? It may have been 10 years ago that this was a test windmill, and they determined that this area is not suitable for windmills, for commercial windmills. Okay? Since then, I have no information, personal information, on whether, say, Mid-American, for example, would be looking for property. If they do, I would assume it would be somewhere on their own property by the river where we already have an industrial area. I would assume, but again. And please keep in mind, too, that this is all ag area, so it almost conflicts with what the state supports and what we support as ag entity versus everything else that goes beyond that. Thank you.
Well, I don't know. I feel like we're flip-flopping here, because when we presented this proposal to the Zoning Commission, the Board of Adjustment, they all were agreeable to the standalone ordinance format and having the Board of Supervisors approve it. We discussed various factors that were related to that process, and so I guess this is news to me that the Zoning Commission would like it to remain in the zoning ordinance, because that was part of our recommendation that we reported to you.
Well, if they only met last night, I think they have the right to change their mind.
Now, did they change their mind because it was the Les Hills parcel?
I-
That's the, okay, that's.
Yes.
I believe what happened is that we talked about this as an ordinance, but standalone, maybe people did not understand that standalone meant outside of the zoning commission and the Board of Adjustments realm. This will come strictly to the Board of Supervisors. It doesn't go through that process where it's the democratic process again, that multiple people, multiple boards see this. That's my only assumption again.
I think we're all learning a little bit more about this as we go, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna let them reserve the right to change their mind or ask questions, or, I mean, that's why they're appointed.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fine. But, you know, I guess what I would say is that if it's the language of the Les Hills that's given folks heartburn, you know, I don't think we necessarily need it. I added it because the board asked me to and because our, you know, stakeholder partners wanted it. But if folks change their mind, that's okay.
I think, like I said, I moved the second hearing, 1250 with Les Hills overlay
In it?
in it. And I say we go a week with comment, we still got a third hearing.
But we're not, I just want to be adamant that we are not creating an overlay district, folks.
Right.
We are not creating an overlay district. All we are doing is we are recognizing a federally recognized landform area
Is not to have a place for a windmill.
as a protected area. And I thought that there was consensus amongst the conservation community that that was a good thing for Woodbury County.
Well,
I'll second it.
okay.
Motion by Raddick, second by Monson.
Before you do that, you need to close the public hearing.
Well, you know, so that's just one recommendation. We still have like a laundry list of other changes and recommendations that we received from the utility and private as well, so.
We got another week to get them all in there, so.
So you want to leave the Les Hills overlay in?
Yeah, and I want to see what kind of emails and comments I get over the next week.
He did not, we want to change the term overlay though, don't we?
If the board wants to acknowledge the Les Hills as a protected area, it would be my recommendation that we would, for purposes of this ordinance, acknowledge the Les Hills landform area as defined by using the data in the Les Hills of Western Iowa Special Resource Study and Environmental Assessment prepared by the National Park Service in 2002. If it helps to not post that information on the Beacon website, if people think that that's giving an impression of an overlay district, you know, you don't have to incorporate that recommendation.
Forgive me for just a second. Do we right now have the legal authority to approve or disapprove land use for a windmill? Do we have the means of saying no?
You're talking about the current ordinance?
Just with law and regulation currently in place.
So,
If somebody wants to put up a windmill, they have to ask us for permission to do that.
my understanding is it's a conditional use, and that doesn't come before the Board of Supervisors. Unless, David, if it's denied, is there an appeal to the Board of Supervisors, or does that go to the Board of Adjustment?
From the Board of Adjustment, it goes to district court.
Okay. So, and I think that was part of the reason why our group recommended a standalone ordinance. To me, this is somewhat analogous to hog confinement situation. Basically, that's controlled by the state. As part of their process, they allow the supervisors to have a public hearing where people can come in and talk about all the reasons why they don't want it there, but ultimately, the local Board of Supervisors doesn't have any say over where it can be built or whether or not it can be built. A standalone ordinance where a project like this comes before the board allows you as the Board of Supervisors to ultimately have that control.
Yeah.
Call a question. Oh, Mark.
Very quickly, Mark, please.
One of the keys in this standalone ordinance is also the fact that they have to pass a road use agreement, part and parcel, with their application for the special use permit. Without having the Board of Supervisors involved in that chain, I'm not sure that we can make that enforceable against a utility company coming in to do the wind farm.
Right, because that goes beyond what would traditionally be in a zoning ordinance.
So right now, the decision goes to an unelected body, and what we're discussing, the decision would come to the elected individuals. Is that a pretty clear distinction?
I think that's.
And there's still public hearings that are required.
Yes, it's still, noticed as required by law, and we still publish those notices, and we would still notify property owners, and we would hold a public hearing, and basically staff such as myself, the county engineer, zoning coordinator, others would, provide a staff report and a recommendation, and that's all transparent and democratic and open to the public, and then ultimately the Board of Supervisors have the decision-making authority, without having to worry about specific zoning districts.
Roll call, please.
We need to close the public hearing first, and I will move that.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Monson to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Roll call vote, please, on the prior motion and second.
Who made the motion?
Radig, second by Munson.
Monson was the second on that.
Monson,
Aye.
Radig,
Aye.
Ung,
Aye.
Wright,
Aye.
DeWitt.
Nay. Second reading is done, as I understand it.
Of course, anybody that has something to say about that, please email us or leave messages. We do read them.
Board concerns? We are adjourned.